15 of Spinning Wheels, the motorsport podcast that we promised would take you behind the visor in all manner of four-wheel motorsport disciplines. And I think it's fair to say that Guy Smith and I have delivered on that, from rally to F1, Indy to NASCAR, sports cars, and today right back to rally as the adventure continues. Guy, above all else, so far in this series, one thing that's becoming plainly obvious: if you want to be a professional race or rally driver, you need to prefer dogs to cats.
It's amazing, isn't it? It's an amazing statistic. I think we've only had maybe one, which I think was Brian Gush.
Brian Gush, yeah.
Preferred cats, but he's not technically a sort of driver or co-driver, so he's more kind of the the brains behind the scenes. So it's an interesting statistic, that actually, isn't it?
Yeah, and it has been a fun ride. Now, I've no idea which way today's guest swings when it comes to small four-legged household pets, but we will get to that. What I do know is that he's a rally legend, co-driver to some of the greats, including Per Eklund, Tony Pons, Stig Blomqvist. Colin McRae is on his CV, Walter Röhrl, and most famously, the inimitable Russell Brookes, the late, great Russell Brookes. If you've seen the artwork for today's show, you'll know the iconic stories we're about to hear. It is, of course, the famous Heat for Hire Opel Manta. Welcome to Spinning Wheels, Mike Broad.
Hi, Paul. Hi, Guy.
Hi.
Now, Mike, I've had some of the pleasure of your tales before, but even I don't know where to start. But I suppose 1968, strapped into a Mini Cooper S on what was then known as the RAC Rally of Great Britain, might be a good place. Or should we start earlier?
Yeah. I was very fortunate. My brother was part of Shenstone Car Club, which in those days was very much a rally club, and I was only, what would I be there, about 18, 19, something like that. But it ran a motoring news rally. It had got 2 or 3 other rallies, and I'd done a few with my older brother, and we won the club events. And one of the chaps, a guy called Alan Jones, don't get excited, Guy, it isn't the Australian Formula One bloke, it was just a bloke that lived in Sutton Coldfield. He got a Mini Cooper S replica, and we decided to do it. And well, we had actually entered the 67 one, but of course that was foot and mouth, so we sort of put it back a year and went off to the 68 one. And it was interesting because our mechanics were Russell Brookes and Roger Platt. It's the first time I'd ever met Russell, actually, and they serviced for us out of Roger Platt's mum's Sunbeam Rapier, which was good fun, and we sort of saw them when they could keep up with us, that type of thing. It was just huge adventure. 5 days, 1 night in bed in Edinburgh, and it was awful, really, because we actually were 11th overall coming out of Silverstone, which was the last stage of the whole event, on our way to Heathrow Airport, and the engine seized. and we just, we couldn't even push it. That was it. And I was so naive in those days. I mean, I literally, somebody gave me a hip flask and I downed it in one. I think I was pissed by the time I got home. And I was so tired, I went to bed. And my father woke me up the following morning fairly early and got the Birmingham Post. And they'd made a report of us finishing the rally because they'd taken the results as the last stage at Silverstone, not getting to the finish. And they said, Birmingham pair, Alan Jones, Mike Broad, fantastic 11th in their first time in the RAC. And I went, gosh, we must have finished. So I got in the car and drove to Heathrow, expecting to get a cup. But I'm told by Jack Kemsley that I was a very silly person, read the regulations and go home. Yeah, so that was.
There's always someone like that at the finish, isn't there?
So you finished the last stage then, but you didn't actually make it to the actual. Oh,
correct.
Nightmare.
After 5 days.
It's even worse than Carlos Sainz, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, yes. He actually, I was there when Carlos did. Yeah. There was me and Andrew Williams for BBC.
We're flicking back to what are we flicking back to? 2000 and
Margam. Gosh, 1990.
That's earlier.
Yeah, 1990. Yeah, I was at the stop line with Andrew, and that's how you got the camera shots, because I was the guy getting the cameraman around that event. Amazing.
Remember that guy with Carlos Sainz smashing his helmet through the
when Lewis window? It was Lewis that did that. Lewis that.
Oh, sorry, it was Lewis Moore, wasn't it? Yeah.
Lewis that did that. Yeah, I'll never forget that. That was a piece of history, wasn't it?
Yeah,
but yeah, that was it. But I did enjoy it, and guy was saying, motoring news events and all that type. You had to do those in those days, and I was doing motoring news rallies. But I then discovered that I really liked big, long distance, world championship stage events. And again, because I was in a decent club, Mark Ridout was in the club. So the next event that I did big was the Portuguese rally the following year, which again was stunning, you know. And they used to run it in those days like Monte Carlo. So we started in Dover, and then you drove to Lisbon and started the rally.
Wow.
I can't imagine the RAC being your first rally and then your next rally being the
My first international.
Portugal.
It was my first international, my first stage rally. Yeah, it was my first stage rally. Yeah.
Because of course, Guy, your dad Pete had an ex-works at Skoda and was doing the Motoring News Championship as well. So you've got a bit of a road rally background in your family back to those days as well.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I kind of grew up really with rallying. As we talked about before, you know, my dad did like Motoring News and all the kind of club stuff. And, you know, we used to go around and follow the rallies, and, you know, I used to watch him working on the car. So I was probably kind of grew up more around rallying than I did racing, to be honest. It was
sensible,
only really
very sensible.
Yeah. Well, you know, I mean, I love the rallying. I mean, I've done a little bit myself, not very successly, but you know, still.
Yeah, I think you've won a rally at my racetrack, Guy. I think that's wrong.
It's kind of more on a racetrack. It's not a proper rally. But you know, I mean, I love the rallying. So
it's not too late.
Sorry,
it's not too late.
It's not too late. No, it's not too late.
Haven't you done the Roger Albert Clark in a Mark 1 Escort? Actually, I remember watching.
I've done it. Yeah, two or three times. I think the best I did was, I think I came like 10th or 9th or something. I remember one of them I was doing reasonably well. I think on the last stage it was snowing and I think I got stuck in a ditch. But no, I mean, I love everything about rallying. I mean, it's just, you know, a lot of fun. Great. You know, it reminds me a lot like karting. It's, you know, you have a lot of, everybody kind of gets on, you know, helps each other out. You have a real camaraderie off the stage or off the circuit kind of thing. And that's what I love about rallying. I think that gets a little bit lost in racing, to be fair. Everyone tends to keep themselves to themselves. And I think, I think the rallying is, you know, that's why you get these great stories, you know. I
totally agree with that. I mean, I was just thinking of that first TAP rally that I did with Mark, you know, Works Tin Can. They had sort of passage controls all the way down, you know what one of those is. So you just had to get there, really. And this one was right in the middle of Madrid. And it was like sort of the Piccadilly Circus of Madrid. We had to find the time controlling. And in those days, no sat navs or anything like that. There was old-fashioned maps. Could we find it? Well, we could find it, but we couldn't actually approach it from the right direction. And we were always going down one-way streets the wrong way and in the end. And it was getting very, very close. So I got in a taxi and told Mark to follow me.
Genius.
And the problem was the taxi decided he wanted to go past it, over the ramp.
Fantastic. I guess they hadn't written that one into the regs, Mike.
Oh gosh, yeah. No, well, you know, it keeps you on your toes. You've got to do whatever you've got to do. As Henry Liddon told me, Henry was one of my absolute stars. I mean, I love that man. He taught me so much. But he always used to say, you know, rules and regulations are like the elastic band. Stretch them as far as you can, never break them.
Yeah.
That's something that, you know, even now you can do. It's more difficult nowadays to stretch regulations, but we did in those days quite a lot.
Every BTRDA competitor's listening to our president of the BTRDA now talking about elastic band regulations.
Yeah, it's poacher turned gamekeeper there.
Exactly.
It really is. He knows the tricks. Don't try it. We got to Portugal then, because although Russell Brookes is your kind of most famous partnership, you went through sitting with some of the world's biggest stars on the way to sitting with Russell, didn't you? It's just your CV includes names that makes people like me have their hairs stand on the back of their necks.
Well, it all really started when I got a job on the London-Mexico rally. You know, I'm a bit gobby. And I was actually doing a Motoring News rally. I did the Express and Star in November '69. And my heroes in those days were John Bloxham and Richard Harper, who lived not so far up the road. But they were winning anything. And I would be coming sort of between 10th and 20th. So whenever I got to a breakfast finish, I'd always go and try and sit with Richard or John. And after that event, Richard sort of said that must have said something like, you know, what are you doing next year? And they said, nothing, we're doing the London, Mexico. And I went, oh, crikey, what's that about? Told me. And I said, oh, I'd like to be something on that, a marshal or something, you know. So Richard, bless him, introduced me to Tony Ambrose. And about 3 weeks later, Ambrose phoned me up in my office in Birmingham and said, you want to come and join us and help organise it? And so I just dropped everything and went. And my father never talked to me for about 6 months afterwards. But I mean, I'd literally just dropped everything. I'd never really stayed in London ever in my life. I found a mate of mine who was working down there, so I shared a twin room in a little guest house on Gray's Inn Road, and off I went. And I went down there in December, and I came back end of June. And I really was the T-boy. But the theory of the thing was that if you're in the centre, you're going to meet everybody. Absolutely. And my contract was to stop the day the rally started, which is why the old man didn't really understand why I wanted to do it. But I just wanted to be inside something as big as that. And everybody was on it. You have a look at who was on the London Mexico in those days. Absolutely everybody. All the Scandinavians, you know, Roger Clarkson, all that kind of thing. And I eventually, because I was a travel agent and my job in the end was organising all the logistics around South America, I actually, it was like you say, the hairs on the back of your head. I had to sit once a week with Stuart Turner, Peter Browning, the bloke boss from Peugeot, and tell them what we were doing and how we were doing it. And I was 20, you know, and they were the big bosses, and I'm going, this is unreal. and it worked because I went to South America and I met all the drivers and co-drivers, everybody. Yeah. And in fact, you know, talking about racing in your career, one of my little jobs, I wasn't supposed to be doing too much in Mexico. So I was the chap that went to the airport to pick up Graham Hill to bring in, who they were sending in to do the prize presentations. I mean, I just met everybody, and that opened the doors. It definitely did.
And
how did it open the? Go on.
Sorry. I'm sort of going off on a tangent. So where did the passion come from for motorsport then, Mike? Where did you kind of?
I don't know. I mean, it wasn't in my family. My older brother was just a club person. We started. We had a Mini Cooper, Alan and I, and I've got a twin brother, believe it or not. And he doesn't look as good as I do, but you know, he used to work for a company called Broadspeed, which ironically nothing to do with us.
Right.
But Ralph Broad, who ran it, was in Solihull, and my father's name was Ray. So they got confused. The local papers were saying that a travel agent won the Nürburgring, 3 hours, and he actually was digging his potatoes in the back garden at the time. We got confused, but we knew them. And Alan went to work for Ralph Broad, and it was John Fitzpatrick's mechanic in the late 60s, early 70s. And he built this Mini Cooper, and I used to go and do hill climb sprints and all the others against my twin brother, and never beat. I could never beat him. And when you're beaten by your twin brother, you go off and do something else.
Yeah.
And when he wanted to do a rally, I sat with him, had a huge argument, decided to never do it again. But I found that I could do that, and he couldn't. So I don't know where the motoring's come in. I'm not a mechanic. I'd struggle nowadays with the WRC because the boys in, the Seb Marshalls of the world, they've got to be really good mechanics. And I wasn't. We had a demarcation zone in our cars that I was in, and a lot of co-drivers, the Mike Nicholsons and the Ian Grindrods and the Rob Arthurs, we were all the same. We were paper. We were organising.
Yeah.
We never got our hands dirty. That was the driver's job.
Yeah.
If he got it into a ditch, he got it out, not us.
Except when you put it in the pond. Do you remember Roger Clark and Tony Mason in the pond? No,
that was Peter Clark.
Or was it?
Yeah.
Tony Mason had to climb on the roof, though, wasn't it?
Yeah. Peter Clark from Skipton, in the Silent Nights Escort. Gosh. Yes. Yeah. Ask me another.
Sorry, tangents. Carry on.
Yeah. So I in answer, Guy, I really don't know. I was really driven. I was thinking about it when you invited me to come on the show and sort of what I did and how I got there. I mean, they Radio Birmingham, which was now Radio WM, they were in Pebble Mill in the days, and they had some really good sports programs and some really good people on it, but no motorsport. So I wrote to them, got an interview, and started doing their stuff, and that then got more people involved that I began to know.
Yeah.
And it just pushed me further and further forward into the sport. And I just loved, I'm a travel agent by heart, so yeah. I love countries and geography and everything else. And just that, going to Portugal that first time and seeing, in those days, you saw the countryside that tourists didn't. It's changed nowadays. Monte Carlo's, we used to do 3 weeks practice. Cyprus, 2 weeks practice, whatever. You could go whenever you wanted and practice whenever you liked for as long as you wanted. Yeah. So you actually got to see the countryside, and And that's what I loved. I mean, the competition's good, yeah, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But it was just going places and seeing things.
What's
Brilliant.
interesting to me is that listening to you speak, Mike, and is that you were obviously very proactive in your career. So once you knew that that's what you wanted to do, you were proactive in, you know, whether it be, I need to meet this person or I need to be at this event. You didn't kind of sit there waiting for it to happen, which
True.
There'll probably be a lot of co-drivers listening to this show and thinking, you know, I wonder how do I become a, you know, professional or professional kind of co-driver. And the reality is you've got to go out there and get it, because so many good, it's like drivers, so many good drivers, so many good co-drivers, so many good presenters. You know, the difference is the ones that actually go out there and chase it and make it happen are the ones that be successful.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely. You've got to know the people. And if you can find a way in that isn't sort of, it's possible for you to get there, then do it. And you know, I don't know whether I consciously did it, but I think I did. I think I realized that, you know, that Mexico was so important. And then following that up, I mean, my first big professional, I got a few drives after that, but my first big professional drive was when my twin brother and I went to the Daily Express trophy meeting in March 74, I think it was, when it was a Formula One race. And we literally just went to watch. And in those days, of course, the spectators could walk through the paddock. And as I was walking through the paddock, I saw Tony Fall coming the other way. Now, Tony had done the Mexico with Jimmy Greaves. I'll tell you a story about Jimmy in a minute. And he was walking the other way. And I just went up to him, and I hadn't seen him for probably 2 or 3 years. And I went up to him and I introduced myself. And he went, "Oh, what are you doing?" And I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I've just started Dealer Opel team in Tom Park. And I've just done the Portuguese rally, ironically, with Robin Turvey, but Robin can't do any more. So I'm looking for a co-driver." And I went, "Hello, that's me. I'll do it." And literally 6 weeks later, the Welsh was on, and the rest is history, as it were. Being in the right place and saying yes, and the London-Sydney came up the same way. Just happened to be time when Andrew said, "I'm looking for a co-driver." I go, "Hello, that's me."
Yeah.
And you've just got to make it fit. It isn't as easy as just saying that, because obviously I was working at the time, and there's jobs and wives and children and mortgages and all that type of thing. So you've got to make it fit, but you've got to be brave and just say yes at the right time, I think.
I love that you were the guy with your hand up.
But you've then got to prove you can do it.
Yeah.
That's the tricky bit.
Well, it's like anything in life, isn't it? It's like, you know, you just got to bluff it. You know, first of all, say, I can do it. And then you figure out how you're going to do it, you know.
Correct. Absolutely.
And then you have to have the trust, have the faith in your ability that you can do it, which obviously, you know, you did. So
I must have been a pain in the ass, to be honest. I really must have been. I mean, it was something like having the Wrigley's chewing gum on your bottom of your shoe. You know, I can't get rid of this bloke. But you know, you've got to do it, and it worked. And every opportunity that you get, you've just, you know, look at it and go. And for instance, that Radio Birmingham thing, it was staggering, because you didn't realise where that was going to lead. I was given a 1-minute piece every other week on Motorsport, and I had to find something to talk about. But if you think about what was happening in the Midlands in those days, you know, there was a lot of car industry, but there was Formula One ensigns that were there, and there was a lot of rallying going. Roger Clark, I could just about get him in to the West Midlands area, and you'd come up with that. I got onto the committee for the Birmingham Super Prix because I happened to be the person doing Motorsport on Radio Birmingham.
Wow. Yeah.
And there was Martin Hone and Jeff May, and I happened to know the Lord Mayor that year, Victor, and on we went. So we had about 4 or 5 years until it was actually a Labour council that got that going.
Was it really?
Yeah, it was amazing. And when they got defeated, sometime when Maggie Thatcher arrived, what was that, 79, 78, the Conservatives got into Birmingham, and they stopped it for a bit. And then when they resurrected it, they didn't invite us back, but we'd done all the homework. The work for it. Which was lovely. Yeah, it's good fun.
I will send you the picture of Dan Elmore's Metro 604 back in its Super Prix livery and regalia after this, and I'll put it on our Instagram as well.
Race the 6R4s as a kind of
a single mate.
Yeah. I remember Peter Slights.
Yes. Yeah.
Prep our cars. He used to prep my rally car, and you showed me some video of it. It looked brilliant. It looked great fun.
The actual event was fantastic. And you know, the city of Birmingham have still got all the Armco and everything else in a warehouse in Birmingham.
Have they really?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's still all there.
I could do with some of that, actually. I'm still on lockdown budgets, Mike.
It was, you know, they closed the market down for the pit, for the paddock area, and unfortunately they couldn't do it now. But Bristol Street Motors became the pit area. It was phenomenal. It was phenomenal. It was a brilliant idea, and we had 3-4 years, I think it was really, really good. Yeah, and a lot of rally people were involved in the organisation and the helping of that, because it was such a buzz. Fantastic time.
It looks good when you see it. So at this point, you're in with Tony Fall. You're still the man with your hand up in the corner, making sure you're in those conversations. At what point did those opportunities start to come to you, and you didn't have to be the man in the corner? You were then turning things down, because there must have been a point.
It was fortunate. Tony was just coming to the end of his career of driving, but of course he'd got the team, and so he became the team boss, really. And when he stepped down, he gave me Tony Pond. He signed. It was interesting because he trusted me.
Tony Pond. What a quote! What a quote!
Well,
I love Tony Pond.
Tony Fall had never really seen Tony Pond until we did the Welsh Rally in '74, and he finished one place behind us, I think. And we started, you know, taking note of what his results were all about. And we went out, Tony Fall and I went out and watched him. And we didn't tell anybody we were there. We literally went into the middle of a forest somewhere by ourselves and watched him. And Tony signed him. And I had 12 months with Tony Pond. And it was interesting, actually, because, I mean, he was a fantastic driver. He was so smooth. He was better on tarmac than he was on gravel. But I lost out to a bloke called David Richards.
Oh, that bloke.
Yes, I know. It was on a Scottish, and we were doing rather well. We were leading in a little 175 brake horsepower Ascona against all the escorts and everything else. And unfortunately, the clutch started slipping, and we had to do a repair on the side of the road. And it was literally as critical as the first cars got daylight and the last stage of the day into Aviemore. And because we'd lost 20 minutes, half an hour doing the repair, we didn't. And we came in about third or fourth in the end. And he blamed us for that. And then the evening before the finish, he disappeared. We were all having dinner, and Tony wasn't around. And then the following morning, last day, he knocked on my door at 6:30 in the morning, which was unbelievable because I had to kick him out of bed most days, you know. And he came in and he went, "Brody," he said, "I want you to read the maps a little better than you are at the moment." I was, "What?" I said, "Where's all this come from then?" And he'd had a meal with David Richards the night before. And David had convinced him that he could read the maps as pace notes. Well, he didn't know better than me, but you know, quite well. So I showed him where we were going, and I can remember the stages, Minority and Colbin, which are the two north ones to the east of Inverness. There was nothing on them, not a dot, nothing. It was just a green blob. So I showed it to Pondy, and I said, "Well, if you can read that, boy, if he can do that, that's fine." And we finished third or fourth, and then I got a phone call in about August before the Isle of Man, about 4 weeks before the Isle of Man, from Tony Fall, saying that Pondy was taking Richards. And the funny thing was, the following year, I got to, it sounds awful, doesn't it? I got Walter Röhrl.
Before we go on to Walter, because he's another fascinating character, what was Tony like as a person, Mike?
Oh, fantastic. A very, very funny boy. I mean, really droll, very dry sense of humour. Lovely bloke. But
someone I would have loved to have met.
But behind all that, and the Mexican tash and all the flair and everything else, he was a very driven person. He didn't like being beaten at all. He was I think Tony could have been as good as a Colin, a Richard, any of those, but he followed the money. And the money in those days, believe it or not, was with British Leyland, which is why he kept on going back. He went to TR, then he went to Sunbeam Lotus, and then he fell out with Des, so he went back to, and they were paying him some serious money in the early 80s. I mean, nobody in the UK was getting anything like what Pondy was on to drive that TR7. I know what it was, I'm not going to tell you, but it was serious money. Yeah. Like about 10 times what Russell would have been on.
Blimey.
I know. It was serious money. And I think if he'd have followed the car rather than the money, I think he would have been an absolute legend.
Yeah.
He is now, obviously, but his results across the world would have been a lot better.
Yeah.
So I got Walter, and I did the national breakdown with him, and we had a reasonable result in a Group 1 car. And the 2-3 nights before the Welsh, they had a really big, in those days, forum on about the Tuesday before the Welsh. And the lineup was Hannu Mikkola, Arne Hertz, Roger Clark, Tony Pond, and Walter Röhrl. Wow. And literally
Very good.
And half an hour before, Walter decided he didn't want to do it because he didn't think his English was good enough. Which, you can't argue, can you?
No.
So Fall put me on it. So I sort of was the reserve, and I plonked on it, and I had a ball. And at one point, somebody asked Hannu how much Arnie helped him in the forest on the maps, because there was no recce. And Hannu said something like, well, we've done them a few times and we know the bad bits, which Arnie always makes a note, but generally he tries to help, but not very much, And Roger said, Jim says nothing. That was it. Because they never used to talk to each other. Ever.
Did not?
No. Apart from junctions, turn left, right, and straight on. That was about it. There was virtually no communication between Roger and Jim.
Really?
Quite astonishing, yeah.
Right.
And then Tony Pond comes up and he said, we've been trying for the last 6 months, Mr. Richards and I, to actually conquer this idea of you describing the route off a map as a pace note. And I can tell you it doesn't work. So we've ditched it. So I grabbed the microphone and said, do you mean I got fired because of a bloke that said he could, but he can't?
How did that go down?
At least I got it back. I didn't get it right back, but I was very happy going with Walter Röhrl, believe me.
Tony Pond to Walter Röhrl, too, on the outside at least, completely opposite characters, aren't they? Flamboyant to completely driven.
Oh, he was. He was a really nice man, actually. He was very shy. He doesn't like journalists. Does now, because that's what he's paid for by Porsche.
Yeah.
But at that time, he didn't like doing anything like forums or interviews or anything like that. He was there. He was paid to win a rally, and that's what he was there to do. He was the most instinctive driver that I've ever been with. There's no question about that. He was the smoothest driver I've ever been. I mean, I remember Malcolm Wilson agreeing with me that he was the best driver that I could have sat with. There's no doubt about that. And he was a downhill skier. He was in the West German downhill ski team when he was about 17, 18. And you could tell it because he drove, I don't know whether you do this, Guy, but he drives by his bottom.
Yeah, backside.
Yeah.
It's your gyro. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, completely, yeah.
And he was so smooth. If he got it out of phase on the loose, he was in trouble. And I remember it was, I can even tell you, it was Hafren. And we were fourth in this little Opel Kadett against the might of the Escorts. And in front of us, we got Arakela, Mikkola, and Vatanen. Which, okay, fourth's okay behind them, But it was the tracks coming out. I can remember one left-hander where we were absolutely in the middle of the road. And you could see where the Escorts had gone in the ditch and 50 yards down, come back again. And they, all over the place. And Walter couldn't understand that. And he'd actually say it. His famous expression was, "Boch, why do they do this?" He just couldn't understand why they got sideways, because that's not the quickest way as far as he's concerned.
Really?
Yeah.
Even back then, because back then it was all about like everybody drove sideways, didn't they? So it's
even back then. I think he was the first one to realise that if you get the right line, you shouldn't have to. Yeah. Mind you, with an Opel Kadett, we probably haven't got enough power to get sideways.
Yeah.
Mike, you talk about drivers using the seat of their pants, but as a co-driver, I've at a very low level managed to do both of those things. And you do the same thing. You must, as a professional co-driver, do just as much co-driving with your bum as the driver does driving with it.
Very much so. Very much so. Although if you go back and have a look at the videos, we are sitting a lot higher in those days than they do now. So, which I mean, it's something I don't understand why we didn't sit so low. We were sitting on the same level as the car, as the driver. which they don't do anymore. And you know, it's much more to do with weight distribution.
Unless you were in a Fiat Mirafiori, of course.
Yes, that was silly.
Back seat, right? Is that the one with the back seat?
Yeah, that was the back seat. Yeah, Christian. I know Christian quite well. Christian said it was the most awful experience he's ever had, and he felt sick for most of the way. You know, he hated it, absolutely hated it. And Walter would tell you that it didn't help. It was more of a pendulum. I mean, if you put 65, no, I suppose Christian must have been about 75 kilos over the rear axle. It's going to be like a pendulum, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
So that wasn't really good thinking. That's probably the worst thing that Fiat ever did. Yeah.
Mike, I'm curious to know, when you switch sort of between drivers, so you go from Tony Pond to Walter Röhrl, how does it, you know, obviously they require different things in terms of notes and things. Does it differ a lot between different drivers? And
very much.
And how difficult is it for you as a co-driver to adapt to that, to the different ways?
It is. I was fortunate that in 71, 72, 73, that time when I was sort of semi-professional, I did a bit with Opel in Finland. So I was used to going with people that didn't speak full English, as it were. And you know, I'd done Per Eklund and, as you say, Stig. With Walter, it was the first guy that I ever knew that did pace notes in numbers. And that was a real revelation, because in the mid-70s, it was all descriptive notes, mediums, fasts, slows, you know, fasts, etc. And suddenly it was Walter. Now, I don't know whether it was the first or not. Certainly the first with me. So this was 76. I did the Tour of Britain with Walter, and we wrecked it everywhere. We shouldn't have done. We took 4 days to get onto Epont. We kept on getting slung off. But he was so frightened about places that he thought he wanted to win. And he said, this isn't fair. Even the likes of Roger Clarks and the Vatnans know everywhere in the United Kingdom. So we literally tested at every racetrack on the Tour of Britain. And the Epont was the big one. And it took, as I say, it took us 4 days. And he was the first one. And he actually graded it numbers by the severity of the corner. I know a fair few people do numbers now by gears. I don't know which is best, because I'm not a driver. You know, if that's what they want me to say, that's what I say.
How did that conversation go when he said, look, we're going to do numbers on this? Or did it just naturally, as the conversation went?
As long as you understand what it is. And as soon as you start going down the road, and I've been used to mediums and fasts and everything else, and you come up to a corner and he says, right, 4. Oh, yes, okay, that's a 4. It soon sinks in. Yeah. And it's about the delivery. I always get into big trouble nowadays, because I really honestly do believe that the co-drivers and drivers that are doing a world championship nowadays just put too much information in there, to the point that there must be a trigger point on what the driver can actually receive. And he's got a trigger point on what word tells him its severity. Yeah. Because there is just too much.
It started with Richard Burns, didn't it? That, with the amount of information
it did. And everybody took it from that one stage that he did on the RAC, which was Radnor, wasn't it? Where he took a minute off the field in the fog. Yeah. And then out comes Richard Burns and Robert and said it was because their pace notes were so detailed. Yeah. Correct. It was. But that only happens about once a year, once every 5 years, or whatever. Yeah. And I just think there's too much in there. If there is fog, if it's likely to be an event that you're getting fog, yes. Yeah. But I still think, how the heck can one person listen to all that? And the driver will tell you he does. I don't believe it.
on the other hand, you know, I often look back at like YouTube and I watch something like a Kankkunen, you know, video, and it's like fast right, medium left. And it's almost the opposite, because actually, you know, it's almost too vague. But there's obviously, like you said, there's probably a happy medium where.
Well, they weren't going as fast. You know, they're going around the corner as fast as we go down the straight. Yeah, that's the difference. So they have to speed it up. Yes, but I totally agree, guys. There's a happy medium somewhere between what's happening now and what happened with us. Yeah. And I have been criticised. I mentored Craig Breen for a couple of years, and I know Ray, his dad, was very vociferous with me. So, and he actually said to me one day, you know, it's not like it is. It isn't like it was in your day. And I'm going, but I think it is. And even I know Gareth and Paul Nagel at one point were saying, "Crikey, I don't know how I'm going to get all this out." And I listened to Oliver Solberg's pace notes on Rome last week or the week before, and he's doing exactly Petter's awful. Have a word with Phil Mills one day. And I think Phil, I don't know, I haven't asked him for a long time now, but I think Phil will agree that there is a lot of stuff that he says that isn't listened to.
Yeah.
So why have it?
Yeah.
That's my thing.
Otherwise it becomes white noise, doesn't it? It's just,
yes.
Yeah.
As a racing driver guy, going from a racing driver, sitting with someone like Patrick Walsh, who is very experienced in the Escort and on the Roger Albert Clark, he's on maps. I think you did on maps, didn't you?
Yeah.
How much information could you take in, you know, as a racing driver?
It is tough. I mean, at first, I thought I was listening to the notes, and then we actually hit fog, and I realised that I was just doing it all, but I actually wasn't taking information. As I got a little bit more experience, and I'm not very experienced, but as I got more experience, particularly, you know, latterly, you actually get you realise you really depend on it, because I'm asking him what's next, or if it hasn't gone into me, I'm saying, you know, what's next, because it's difficult to retain the information. But as you become more relaxed, you're not thinking so much about the driving. You're thinking about what the information. You're more open to receive the information, so it's easier. I think at first there's so much going on that you just focus on driving, but as you get more experience, you're a bit more open. So I guess like with the WRC guys, they can, you know, it's a skill, isn't it? It's something that you develop, and you know.
But I still think there is, with all that information, there's a trigger somewhere in all that information that actually makes him pay attention from that point onwards. I remember I did the Tour of Britain with Jerry Marshall, which was probably one of the favourite events of my life. To be honest,
that was great fun, wasn't it?
Yes, unbelievable was Jerry. He was physically ill before Eppant.
Was he?
And he knew, yeah. He was absolutely out on the side of the road before Eppant.
Wow.
And I'd already, he didn't do any recce's at all. I did, because I was a bit concerned, and I'd had some notes of Eppant, and I knew where Eppant was going to be on which stages. So, and it's the only time that I will openly admit that I cheated. But I was so concerned that, and this was days before I didn't know he was going to be ill. I was concerned that Jerry would do a Noel Edmonds and just barrel it off Eppant, you know, because it is tricky, very, very tricky.
Isn't it?
Yeah, I've still got, but why they're in my bedside table, I'm not sure, but I've still got the 3 little books that I went to W.H. Smith's and got, and they fit completely in the palm of my hand.
Have you really?
About 4 notes on each page. And I didn't tell him anything until we got to the start of the stage. Probably made him ill, actually. So I said to him, right, I have got some notes for this. It was about 8. The first stage I remember was about 8, 9 miles long. It was very, very hot that year, which was probably another reason he wasn't so well. And I said, right, I'm going to tell you exactly what's coming. I did descriptive so he'd understand it rather than numbers. And I said, you will do exactly what I tell you, and we'll be okay. And we were in a Vauxhall Magnum, sponsored by Chunky Chickens. I remember a side story when Jerry unfortunately died, and the Motorsport News had, I don't know, 10 or 15 pages on Jerry. And at the bottom, I've still got it upstairs somewhere, on the bottom of each page was a Marshall quote. And somebody had asked Jerry, which was the worst car that he'd ever driven in his motorsport career. And he said, undoubtedly, it was the Chunky Chickens Vauxhall Magnum. And Brody and I did the Tour of Britain in 1975 or whatever it was. He said, we tried to kill the bastard and it wouldn't slide down. Basically, it was on 3 cylinders for the whole event.
Oh, yeah.
And it was because it was so hot, they couldn't cure it for some reason.
Yeah.
We got 6th fastest on Eppant on 3 cylinders.
Wow.
Because he did exactly what I told him to do. Yeah. He was good.
Oh,
very, very good.
Very good.
He came second to Roger Clark at Snetterton on the night race because it was at midnight, cool enough, and it was the only time he ever had 4 cylinders.
Yeah, yeah.
But unfortunately, he drank quite a bit.
Oh yeah, yeah. You like to drink.
We had it in the car.
Did
you?
Okay.
Joking.
We used to, special stages and everything. We used to see the boys just before the stage, and he'd take the crate out and carry on. He was on his third pint when he did the Snetterton race. It was unbelievable. We couldn't find him. I remember Alex and Ian, mechanics. They sort of, I said, "Where is he?" Don't know. Lost him. Found him in the bar. Jerry, come on. Oh, just calming the nerves, dear boy.
I heard that Mr. Clark liked a drink or two as well, didn't he?
Oh, Christ, oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
They sound like the days, Mike. They really do.
We Russell and I would always have half a bitter the night before a rally. I suppose we're not even allowed to do that now. I don't know. No, you wouldn't get breathalyzed on that. And it was a psychological thing, just to make sure you had a nice night's sleep and everything else. It was just half a pint just before you go to bed. That'll do.
I'd have a beer. I'd have a beer before a race, not straight before a race, but the night before. Maybe just one, just one like bottle or something. Just because we actually used to do it because it was like a good luck thing. I think we did it and we had some success, and then it's like, well, actually, like we've got to do it now. Made a point of it. And,
yes. That's virtually what we did. It was all psychological, that you've had your beer and you're nice and relaxed and you're going to have a good night's sleep and off you go.
Yeah. We've been pulled out of a nightclub at 4 o'clock in the morning. Although I stayed away from Jason Plato, so it might have been different.
not every time. So the legend goes.
No, that's true. That's very true. Yeah.
So.
Cheers, boys.
Yeah, cheers, Mike. Carrying on the traditions. I love talking about this era of rallying. Although it wasn't my era, I grew up watching beta videos from my dad of this era and tales, e-tales, and.
Well, I was watching a couple of YouTubes yesterday, actually, of the 80s, and I don't think we realised just how special it was at the time. But you do look back now and you think, it was as good as a World Championship entry half the time, whichever international rally. And then you have a look at the entries of the RAC rally in between sort of 1974-5 all the way through to the end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s. Any of the first 20 could have won it.
Yeah.
Because there were so many manufacturers and they'd all got 3 or 4 cars.
Yeah.
Fall and I were always sort of seeded around about the back end of the teens, but we could still have won. I mean, Russell was good. I mean, Russell's the results ratio on the RAC, okay, he never won it. But you have a look how many times he got into the top 10. Phenomenal. Yeah. I mean, I think I was with him, how many? I suppose I did about 7 RACs with him, and I think we only out the top 10 twice.
Wow.
We, 5th, 6th, 7th, which 5th and 6th, you don't sound very good. Have a look at who's around us and who's behind us.
You had two 5th places, didn't you, on the RAC, actually?
Yeah. And I think we were I think Jimmy beat us one year when he was in a Mantra 2-wheel drive. But, it was just the year that if Russell had got a 4-wheel drive car, by golly, we would have had some fun. Yeah. He did, of course, but too late. He got that Lancia Delta and he didn't do enough practice with him. That's when I actually split from him, which was terribly amicable. I mean, he was wonderful with it. I going back to wife, mortgage, kids.
Yeah.
Russell couldn't guarantee what I was going to do the following year.
Yeah.
But when Fiorio phones you up and said, "Do you want a Lancia Delta for the RAC?" he couldn't say no, could he?
No.
So he had to. But for me, that was wonderful. But what was next? Yeah. And I could stay, and I actually got a bloke called Malcolm Wilson after that, so that was all right. And then I got my Metcalf, so that was amazing.
But didn't the fact that so many of you could win and that the entries were so fabulous and so international, that kind of led you guys to become superstars? And one of the stories I love, I've heard you tell it once in a public forum, then you told me it as well in a bit more detail, was the story about how at your daughter's school you became somewhat of a celebrity, which is kind of unheard of now. You can't imagine a current WRC co-driver being, that famous at a school.
It was all about having rallying on terrestrial television and not the option of whatever, Netflix and God knows what else. In the 80s, the British Rally Championship would be on a half-hour programme every Saturday afternoon after each event. the RAC Rally would be on every single night on Top Gear, or if not on Top Gear, another standalone half-an-hour program. When we won the British Championship in 1985, well, I mean, I was on the BBC Today. I was on TV AM in the morning because we'd been sponsored by them. I was on ATV, you name it. We were, it was big results. And that's why, the story of it was quite funny, really, because my daughter Claire was she was about 8 then, 7 or 8. And I had the week off afterwards, and I was just taking her to school because I didn't do it very often. I wasn't there. So she got in the car and she said, well, can we pick Robbie up on the way? And I went, yeah, who's Robbie? And he lives around the corner. So picks Robbie up, puts him in the back.
What car were you driving?
I'd got a Manta. I got a works. Yeah, I got a Manta. That was very nice. A new car every 6 months. It was lovely. And we put them in the back, strapped them all in, and Robbie said, could I have your autograph, please, Uncle Mike? Or if you got a big sticker or something. I said, I can fix that. He said, but I'd like your autograph. And my daughter looked at him and said, Robbie, don't be so ruddy stupid. Because she just couldn't, and has never really, I told a story at a dinner a few months ago that my girls are wonderful. Don't get me wrong. They're fantastic. They're my life. But they never really understood what Dad was all about. I'd just go off to work and come back 2-3 months later.
I have 3 daughters, Mike, the same thing.
Yeah, they just don't get their heads around it, really.
You go to Silverstone and people are coming up asking for your autograph, and they're kind of looking as if to say, what do they want your autograph?
Exactly. It's weird, isn't it? It is weird. But the funny thing was that, I'm very fortunate. I know a lot of lovely, lovely people. And one of my favourite people is Paddy Hopkirk.
Yeah.
And I'd seen Paddy. I saw Paddy in February and I thanked him because this Christmas, we were watching Mary Berry's Christmas program on the telly, and she had it in her home and she was doing all the cooking in her kitchen. And then right at the very end, she said something like, and then the best thing of Christmas, of course, is to sit down with your family and your closest friends for a really wonderful Christmas lunch. And sitting next to Mary Berry's husband was Paddy Hopkirk. And my girls went, don't you know him? I said, yeah, well, that's Paddy, yeah. You know somebody that knows Mary Berry. I said, oh, well, that's it, you see. It's taken me 70 years to impress my daughters. But now I know I'm the person that knows somebody that knows Mary Berry.
Brilliant.
But, yeah, it's kids, isn't it? It's lovely. They actually bring you back down to earth, Guy, don't they?
They do, which is great. It's great. I have to say the heat for hire for me, if I think of that era of rallying, that scheme is probably the most iconic. I mean, I know there's been lots of different ones, but that one I remember sort of when I was growing up and watching the rallying. That I mean, I would have been watching that car and I probably wouldn't have realised at the time, that you were in there with Russell. But what an iconic, what an iconic. How long did you have that Russell have?
19. It was there 19 years.
19 years. See, that's why it's iconic because of the longevity of the front.
He's still got. Oh, up until he died last year. He still had and you both did a very good relationship with the original owner of Heat for Hire, didn't he?
Oh, absolutely. Still do. Robert, actually, Russell's son. Who I spoke to a couple of days ago, John Andrews is his godfather. Oh, wow. It was a beautiful relationship in so much that Russell worked for the company, really. Yeah. I mean, he didn't, but he did. Everything he did. And John Andrews will tell you now, I mean, he told me at Russell's funeral that, the most amazing thing is it worked. He did get business out of Ford. He did get business out of General Motors. He did get extra air conditioning and heat for hire stuff from around the country because of the motorsport. Yeah. And as long as he could go back to, I mean, okay, he owned the company, got a board of directors that he had to sort of convince that it was worth spending quite a lot of money. In today's terms, not a lot, but in those days when, the company had only been going 10 years before Russell actually went and got some money off them.
Yeah.
And to keep it going for that long. And believe me that, at the end when they were in the Sierra Cosworth days, they were spending quite a bit of money.
Yeah,
and by that time, Sykes had come on board as well. So they had to convince another board of directors that it was worthwhile. And it wasn't an awareness thing like I don't know whether Vodafone or anybody else that sponsors big stuff within Formula One or rallying, that's an awareness advert as far as I'm concerned. I don't know whether they actually look at how much money they get back in.
I watched that as a kid, and I'll give you last year, no, 3 years ago, I started at Cadwell Park, 3.5 years ago, and we ordered stuff from Andrew Sykes for our British Superbike event. Now, when I saw that on the order form, when I was booking my first stuff for BSB, I went around the girl in the office and I said, "Oh, you're Heat for Hire, aren't you? You used to be Heat for Hire." And she goes, "Oh, I think so, yeah." I said, "Oh, you used to do Russell Brookes and the Heat for Hire cars. But I don't know. Do you want us to pick it up on Monday or Tuesday?" I was really disappointed that you couldn't share in my excitement about that.
Well, I think the last director, Dennis Gwynn, actually retired. That worked all the way through that. He retired this year, so I think sort of the link has gone now. But
I remembered it being
still getting
even now.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know whether you were there at Race Retro when they had that unbelievable show of cars that had one of Jimmy's cars there as well. It was fantastic, wasn't it? Andrew Sykes is still getting business out of the cars, and they're not even paying a penny. If you think about it, they're still in business, and there are people like yourself that still get things because they used to do that.
Yeah.
So I
think the Mantas had the best range, because I collect model cars, and Wayne Goldring of Special Stage, he and I've got a bit of a competition on the old Porgy Mantas, because they did every one. They did the AC Delco one, did the Rothmans one. They didn't do the Heat for Hire one, but Wayne, I think, is actually making his own as we speak. But they had you had such a great range of iconic sponsors on those cars, like yes.
I think the other thing, of course, Manta was so big you could put a lot of words on it.
Yeah. I like the Manta. I like the Manta. I think it's a good looking car though. I liked it.
I was so jealous when the 3 years that we were in was it 2 or 3 years we were in the Chevette. The bond of co-drivers in those days was fairly good. It really was. The Ian Grindrods, the Rob Arthurs, the Terry Harrimans, the Mike Nicholsons, and we were all good, really good mates. And I was, when Jimmy started in the Rothmans Manta, and I actually went and sat one day in Grindrod's seat in that Manta, and I thought, this is like armchair stuff. It's fantastic. The space, and you put all your books there, and absolutely. Then I got into my piggy little Chevette, with the knees around your ears, and I was really jealous. The Manta was a fantastic car to sit in as well, because it's a long wheelbase and a wide wheelbase. It rode bumps and everything else brilliantly. The only problem was it was like a bloody oven. I mean, it was so hot. You think you get hot in well, I suppose you do in the Bentley, yes.
Yeah.
Do you? Have you got aircon in that?
We don't have any of the Bentley luxury. All the air conditioning and all the leather and all the things that make it a Bentley get taken out, because you got a half the weight of the car. So it gets a bit steamy. Of course, you're in there for probably 2 or 3 hours, so it gets a bit sweaty.
My dad said to me, he remembered somebody saying that the Manta was such a hot car to be in.
It was unbelievably hot. Unbelievably hot. The only other car that was as hot was that Mercedes that we actually asked
the London to
Mercedes to leave the aircon in, and they wouldn't do it.
Is that the one that you won the London to Sydney on in 77?
Yeah. That apparently it took something like 10 brake horsepower off it in those days.
Yeah.
I don't know whether that's true or not, but they certainly, Waxenberger definitely wasn't going to let us have any aircon.
With our cars, whenever we do qualifying, we turn the aircon off, because it's all power draining. Anything you can turn off, you turn off for qualifying. So yeah, you could well do that. And of course, it's heavy.
So you've got it fitted.
Yeah.
It's fitted.
It's fitted. Well, actually, now we have to have it because it has a temperature sensor in the cockpit. So I don't actually know what the number is, but if it reaches a certain threshold, they can actually exclude you. That's in the Le Mans prototype. In the GT car, it's different. We have a helmet blower, so it blows cool air into your helmet, and it's one of those things that you never really feel like it's working until it comes off, and then you realise just how much it actually helps.
But the amazing thing is, we never really. Well, definitely Russell didn't. We never really thought about fitness.
Yes.
And yet, we were sitting in cars at 50 degrees C in Cyprus for 4 days, dehydrated or whatever. Yeah, okay, you get water in you and all that type of thing. But I never used to go running around the bike or anything like that. We were all, I don't know, I suppose we were match fit because we were doing so many events.
But whenever I've been rallying, I've always gone to what I call the rally diet. So you end up a lot of chocolate because you're driving from stage to stage. Service times are short, so you tend to grab what you can grab. You know, unless you really prepare and take all the stuff with you, you end up grabbing whatever you can when you can. And it's just energy, isn't it? Especially if you're doing the long rallies, which you would have done, and you're at night time. You get hungry, right? I'll have a chocolate bar, or I'll have some crisps or whatever. So, I mean, obviously it's changed latterly, but you know.
Well, it has actually, yes, because I can remember the very, very first time that I used to have a few caravans around on events, but the first time I can remember a motorhome of any description was 74 RAC, when Tony Fall, his mate, used to run Hammond's Chopped Sauce in Shipley, I think it was, in Yorkshire. And he used to sponsor not a steel band, a brass band.
Right.
And we had him at the start once. I cannot tell you one story about that. The 74 RAC, I think it was 74, 75 RAC. We were tipped to do, it was 74. We were tipped to do rather well because it was starting in York and all around Yorkshire to start with. And the second stage, I think it was at the hill climb at near Bradford. So
Yeah.
Harewood,
Yes.
And it started at the top and went down the sort of the Trinity Road and then came back up and in the paddock at the bottom, there are some really large curbstones, unfortunately, and we whacked one sideways, and literally the wheel arch was holding the rear axle in as we came out the top.
Really?
But we were only sort of 6 miles from Tong Park from headquarters, so we nursed, in inverted commas, the car to Tong Park and put a new axle in it. And we arrived at the next stage was Esholt, which literally is 600 yards from Tony Fall's headquarters in Tong Park. And we were there 30 seconds before OTL. In other words, 29 and a half minutes late. And I remember this marshal going, "Hey, up, Fall, we're a bit late, aren't you, pal? We were thinking you weren't arriving." So off we rush. And the first section that I'd always known, because that's where the famous pub from what's the ITV program?
Hill? No. Sorry, not. Oh.
It's the Woolpack. What's the
Woolpack in Emmerdale?
Oh, the Woolpack.
Emmerdale.
Sorry, you're throwing the Woolpack. Right.
So I'd been there, so I knew what Esholt was all about, but I'd no idea that Esholt actually was a stately home at the back, and it's like Longleat. It's amazing. So in and out of all this Esholt sewage works to start with, which wasn't so nice, and then off onto these very nice sort of perimeter tracks around the Esholt Hall, and the axle let go again. Lost it and went straight through a big rhododendron hedge and stopped the other side of it. He looked at me and he looked and he says, "Just look where we've stopped." And we'd stopped at the foot of the stairs of the steps into Esholt Hall. And at the top of the stairs was the Lord Mayor of Bradford, all the City Council, and most of the sponsorship team from the Lombard RAC Rally having cocktails.
Did you join them? Did you join them?
No, did we? I mean, the Lord Mayor came in, and I remember he opened my door, and I remember his chain hitting my helmet. He looked across at Fall and said, "Hey, stop for a drink then, Fall. Come on in." We had to get Tony's missus to come and pick us up because we couldn't actually sort of walk too much further. So we did 4 stages that year. Good fun.
Tell us about the 77 London to Sydney then, because the marathon rallies in those days, I mean, even a normal rally was a marathon compared to these days, but the marathon rallies were something else. And the Mercedes that you had that year, it was you, Andrew Cowan, and 3 of you.
Colin Malkin.
Colin Malkin. And it's just got a big girder on the front.
Yeah, but you could pick that up with one finger.
Really?
That was titanium.
Ah.
There were sand ladders for going through the desert. Very clever, because that's exactly what we said when we first saw that car. What the heck are they?
Yeah.
And then literally you could pick them up, balance them all on 2 fingers because they were quite long. Very, very light and very strong.
Guy, do you remember when Nicky Grish showed us his trophy cabinet? Well, Mike Broad has sent me a picture of his trophy in his office, I think it is, isn't it, Mike? And it's the 77 London to Sydney trophy. If you're going to have a trophy in your office.
Nice.
Yeah, that's about the only one I've got out, actually. It is special because, of course, unfortunately, Andrew and Colin and Owen were with us, so I'm the only one left. Again, being the right place, right time guy. I was with, name drop, I was with Walter doing the Scottish, and thankfully we crashed. I know that sounds daft, but we got back to Alvimore, and Walter had brought his girlfriend, Monica. My wife was there because Monica was there. Andrew arrived on the back of a tow rope in a works escort that had blown its engine, fortuitously, and we all said, we'll have dinner. And during that dinner, Andrew said that he was looking for a co-driver. He was going to take it 3 up with Colin, but he hadn't got a co-driver because his previous co-driver was married to his Andrew Cowan's sister and had just got divorced, and he wasn't talking to him, so he wouldn't have him. And I said, what's all this about then? He said, well, it's London, Sydney, starts in August, comes back in September, in the next 6 months. And I said, I'll do that. And so it went on from there. And Andrew then phoned my wife on the Tuesday, and I didn't know about it. And Andrew then said, I know he said yes, but is it all right? And I thought that's the manner of the man,
That's really good.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
And literally at the end of that week, I was in Stuttgart. It was unbelievable. And in those days, still, Mercedes hadn't come out. They were still at the end of the 1955, we're not going to do any more motorsport bit. But their workshops in Untertürkheim were the biggest motorsport workshops in Europe. But they weren't there. They even had their own test track immediately outside the back of Untertürkheim. It was quite phenomenal. Banked tracks, the lot. And there was probably 8 to 10 cars being built. They actually put 6 into the event in the end. The amount of money they threw at that, but they were not allowed to enter as a works team, which is why we had the rank organisation. Tony Fax had Johnson's, somebody had Jägermeister, etc., etc. It was all, and I think those sponsorship deals were very cheap. Yeah. Very, very cheap.
How long is that event then, Mike? The London Sydney. How long is it?
It started on August the 14th and it finished on September the 28th.
Wow.
And it literally did go from London to Sydney. It's not just a headline, is it?
No.
In those days.
No. We were the last event to get through Afghanistan before the borders shut, before the Russians invaded.
Really?
The only serious bit was from Singapore down to Perth, where they had to put the cars on. But Andrew was unbelievable because he'd won the previous one, obviously, and he was king of Australia. I mean, I didn't realise just how big Andrew Cowan was even then, until I flew with Fawkes to Perth whilst everybody else was sitting in Singapore. We were going to do a recce of some of the stages in Australia. And as you came out of the airport of Perth, one of the biggest hoardings, these huge airport hoardings, it says, Andrew Cowan recommends Yokohama. I went, Jesus wept. Now he's famous here then. And of course, he'd won the round Australia rally, I can't remember what they call it now, Reddix or something like that, about 4 or 5 times. And him and Mitsubishi, and even in those days, that's where Mitsubishi came. To him, they knew him. And his calmness and his awareness. He unfortunately, his mother died just before the event, so he couldn't come and do any recce. So I mean, we recce'd it.
Yeah.
19,000 miles, and it wasn't all special stages, but all the serious stuff we recce'd.
Wow.
We split it all up. I know it was phenomenal. So, but there was Fawkes and I did Yugoslavia, Greece. What was Yugoslavia in those days? Yugoslavia, Greece, Turkey, and a bit of Iran. And then John Todd and Akim did Iran and a bit of Afghanistan. And then we did a bit of Malaysia whilst we were waiting for a boat from Mumbai across. And then all of us split up Australia and we'd all agreed what style of notes we were going to have. And we all bomb burst and off I went. I did Adelaide, Flinders ranges back down to Melbourne and across up to Queensland in a week with Fawkes. It was hard work.
Yeah. Good fun though. Great fun though. It must have been awesome. Oh. Yeah.
Well, I didn't really know what I was getting into.
No.
Colin and Andrew did. I remember somebody, you know, the finish at, I mean, I suppose it was the highlight of my motorsport career, actually, was driving across the Sydney Harbour Bridge with an echelon of police riders in front of you. And looking down, you look down onto the Sydney Harbour Opera House. And there's about 10,000 people there waiting for you. And you know, in 5 minutes' time, you're going to be down there. I was crying my eyes out.
Wow. That sounds powerful.
It just got to me. I mean, and then somebody said, you know, will you go down and do it again? I said, not on your Nelly. It was hard work. Yeah, it really was hard work. But
Paul,
good.
what notes we've got about it says here about the Rothmans lollipops.
Oh yeah, one of the stories you told me, because one of the people that I would love, Tony Pond's one of them, but there are certain people in rallying that I never got to meet, except when I was a baby, when my dad used to tell me, Henry Toivonen, you know I love Henry Toivonen. And I asked you for a story about what Henry Toivonen was like, and you told me about lollipops, Mike.
Yeah, can I come on to the lollipops?
Yes.
Just 1 minute.
Yeah,
because
of course.
I first met Henry in 1978. And I couldn't tell you how old he was, but he looked about 10. I'd been with Andrew the year after the London-Sydney in the London Lotus Sunbeam, and we were doing the development work before it was homologated. So we were only doing national rallies and all this type of thing. And then in the middle of August, Andrew had an offer, which I found out later, from Mercedes to go back to them. So he engineered an argument, which wasn't difficult to do with Des O'Dell, and got fired. So then Des phoned me up and he said, you haven't got a driver. You know, I'll let you know. And I had nothing. And there's me just knowing, well, I had a contract, but no income, I thought. So I phoned John Davenport up and said, help. And he gave me Sibo Lamperdham for the RAC Rally, which was wonderful. So we did a bit of testing and all that. And there was Ian Grindrod, myself and Fred Gallagher were the three co-drivers. And we were down to Abingdon the week before the rally every day to do the maps and do the service schedules and all the bits and pieces. And then on the Monday before the rally, Des O'Dell phoned me up at home and said, when are you going to come and do our service schedule? And I went, what? He said, well, you've got a contract with me. If you have a look in the full print, it means that if I ask you to do something, you got to do it. I'm going. I said, you do realise I'm doing this with the TR7? He says, yeah, I've seen the entry list, but you've got to come back. So Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday night, I left Abingdon at about 4:30, drove straight to Humber Road in Coventry to Chrysler headquarters, went up to the office and did the service schedule for Henry Toivonen and somebody else. He was in a little Sunbeam in those days as well. First time I'd met him. And it wasn't until about the 4th or 5th service point that they realised that the same place for TR7s and the Sunbeam Lotuses were servicing in the same place. And I wonder why that happened. But I just changed the headings and how many vans were in which place and got on with it. Oh, no, gosh. Anyway. No, Henry was great. And that was on a circuit of Ireland that I remember the lollipops, because Robin Turvey was the coordinator. The best coordinator in the world. He taught me so lot. Again, very calm, very organised, forward thinking, got everything taped. And he got a lovely, lovely lady who's still alive, bless her, Lynn. And she'd come along with the motorhome and do all the catering for us. And if you were, and she had lollipops, and you had a red one, a green one, and an orange one. And if you'd have been at the end of each day, it depended how you had finished on the day, if you were first, second, or third, or whatever, or had you been nice to her, had you enjoyed her food. And there was this wonderful photo, and I'd forgotten all about this. And it came up on YouTube. There was this lovely photograph, and there's me with a green lollipop, and there's Grindrod next to me with an orange, lemony, yellowy one. And Grindrod sent me this text message, said, I must have given you the green one, because I can't believe that you got one in front of me. You would have Grindrod on this. He's so funny. If you had a red one, you were in serious trouble. You weren't going to get any food the next day.
I remember Grindrod on the Manx with John Stone, actually. One of the years that I covered it with Special Stage, and he was a real character. You were all characters in those days. Why did you and I suppose Russell as well never jump into one of the big Group B supercars?
Timing.
Sorry, complete tangent, but it's just a burning question.
Well, we would have done had Group B was going into Group S, and we would have had that Astra Group S. There's no doubt about that. Yeah. We were just in the process doing that.
And actually, there was one in your colour scheme, wasn't there?
Yes, at one point, just for one event, yeah. But he didn't actually do a proper rally. Well, he did. He did one rally. He did the Wolverhampton and Staffs one. What do they call it in those days? The Audi Rally or something like that. When 1986, when Alistair Sutherland was in the Metro and Andrew Wood was in the 4S.
Right.
And they brought the 4S out. It was not homologated, and we could do it because it was a national rally. And it actually probably used more batteries than fuel.
This is a big wide arch Mark II for anyone who hasn't seen it. It's got louvers everywhere.
Yeah, they put it onto the Dakar project in the end, and he did Dakar with Guy Coulsel and a few others. I don't know. We were really unlucky. We were with Vauxhall, then we went to Mansa's. Opel didn't come up with a 4-wheel drive machine at all. We stuck there. John and Andrews wanted us to primarily do BRC. That was, you know, we went and did other European events. We won in Bahrain, we did Cyprus and Helsinki, we did Thousand Lakes and all the others, but they were one-offs.
Yeah.
And Russell was brilliant at getting sponsorship. I mean, we did Cyprus and Bahrain and a few of the Middle East events with Marlboro. And here's a lovely story. I mean, he went out and met the people in Switzerland in about 1982, and he told me he was going. He came in. I said, "How did he get on?" He said, "We didn't get it." I said, "Why not?" He said, "Well, we weren't asking enough." I went, "Pardon?" He said there was an amount of money under which they wouldn't bring out their circus, because they don't just put a name on the side of the car. They put the PR machine in. You probably understand it better than I do, Guy, because the whole PR machine would click into action. If it was under a certain amount, it obviously wasn't big enough. So all Russell did the following year was double it. Literally. Nothing else changed on it. He just doubled the request for the amount of money and we got it.
That's just like the Brian Gush story, guy, isn't it?
It is with the budgets, yeah, exactly.
You'll never do it for that.
Yeah, you never do it.
Sorry, I digress.
Really?
I'll add 10% and go back, and suddenly, it's agreed. It's crazy, really.
So you got it on after doubling the budget.
Yes, absolutely. And then there was Mohammed bin Saleh and Russell, and we got because of the connection with Mohammed.
Yeah.
Because he still is very big in the Middle East. We got Marlboro, and I remember, here's a lovely story. We did the deal a little bit too close up to Cyprus for our own good, really. And Marlboro insisted on having their proper Marlboro overalls, and I wish I'd kept one, but I haven't. They were like, I always say they were like the Niki Lauda ones. You know, they were brilliant, and they were made by Simpson in America. So we had to fill a form in with all our measurements and fax it over to America. And they said they would fly 3 sets of overalls to Nicosia for the start. Wow. And they arrived, and I remember we were in the Hilton and we were at a press conference, and this parcel arrived, and the bloke from Marlboro said, "You better wear those for the press conference." So I got into mine, and I thought, wow, these are just fantastic. Unbelievable. I can believe I'd got a Marlboro set of overalls. Yeah. And then Russell, he stood up in them, and there was still a foot of the leg that went over the top round, and he said, "Well, I can't come out like that." So we sort of scrunched his legs up and stapled them so that he could actually walk onto the stage and look half good. And then they sort of went off to get done properly overnight, and you can do that in Cyprus, and did it properly. But what we sort of realised that had happened was the lady that receives the fax gets it that this are for racing drivers because they don't understand what a rally is, and that this guy is 17.5 stone and he's 5'6". But you can't be 7.5 stone and 5'6". No, I must have made a mistake. So he must be 6'6".
Oh no! So you got James Hunt's size.
About 9 inches too long.
Oh, jeez.
Oh dear, because he was a little barrel, bless him. You know. He got stamina, and I'll bet him that. But, you know, you couldn't find him in a crowd. That was the problem.
Mike, we've got quite a few questions. I've picked some good ones out that people have asked us. But I do, from my point of view, you're president of the BTRDA now. There's not much that happens in rallying in this country that you haven't got some kind of input, and you pop up everywhere. you know, I was lucky enough to work on the WRC media on the Rally Great Britain, Wales Rally TV a few years ago, and you were there, you do that. From your point of view, rallying has lost its mainstream audience. There's no arguing about that. Has it also lost its way a little as a result?
Yes, I think it has. I mean, I'm working with Dave Richards at the moment to try and come up with some ideas to bring BRC back, and I don't think you're going to see an answer for 2021, unfortunately. But yeah, it has, and it's a lot to do with cost, money. I think up to when David arrived at Motorsport UK, they didn't want to spend any money. And if they found a sponsor, they only spent the money that the sponsors arrived, and they haven't found a sponsor big enough to be able to do it properly. That isn't the answer. You mustn't rely just on what coming in. You've got to go somewhere else. You've got to revamp. And I think British Rally Championship has got to change. My own personal feeling is that I'd love to see it just a closed road stuff. I mean, honestly, that's, you know, Motorsport UK, as far as I'm concerned, they've fought like heck and done very well to get closed roads in Wales, Scotland, and England now. We've always had it in Northern Ireland and the Isle of Man. They've done the hard work. They've got it through. We can actually close roads and do it. So why not support it? Why not make that the BRC and then have a gravel rally championship if you want?
So effectively, the Asphalt Rally Championship, as it is now, becomes BRC.
Plus, because there are events there that, you know, you've got Circuit of Ireland, Ulster, Cardigan Bay Rally, and all that are not in that Asphalt Championship. So it's got to be different. I think there's room actually for a BRC closed road, big one, but Isle of Man, you know, the Poker Stars type Isle of Man, the 3-day one in September rather than the one in May. Maybe have an Ulster or a Circuit of Ireland, have the Cardigan Bay, have the Jim Clark, this, you know, Clacton, whatever, and the Asphalt Championship. You know, for the ones that would mix Eppant, Otterburn, and the smaller, the 3 Shires, you know, the smaller closed road one. I think we've got enough events there to do 2. There's no doubt that forest rallying is not going to get any bigger now because of cost. The costs of stage rallying in the UK in the forests is going to increase. No question about that. I think we've just about got to the level where people can't afford to do too much more. So either we've got to come down a little bit on mileage, about 38, 40 miles, 44 miles, whatever, maximum 45. But you're not going to see 90 miles or 100 miles. You know, just have a look. Guy, you've done Roger Albert Clark. The entry fee for that's £3,500 or something like that, isn't it? And people can't afford that every year, which is why it's on every other year.
Yeah.
But when they do the Roger Albert Clark, they don't do anything else. Yeah. So the actual entries for the events before the Roger Albert Clark are decreased. So that's got to be taken on board.
I'll tell you what, that would be motive in a room, wouldn't it? That line of debate.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I realise there is serious issues, but it's popular. It just doesn't get the promotion.
And also commercially, if you're doing the road rally stuff, if you start off from a town centre or whatever, it's much easier to have sponsors there. You can have, you know, hospitality. I mean, you know, obviously we do the BRC with Matt Edwards and you know, we brought UASA in. You know, they actually really love it. They really love it. And obviously they did the first round and
yeah, I was there on the Cambrian. I saw the boys there.
Yeah, and they loved it. And then they're really up. They want to continue. But it really works when you can, you know, can take guests. I mean, the forest stuff is great, but it is hard because it's hard to get access to the stages.
Well, that's another reason, Guy, why I think BRC ought to go closed roads, because if you actually see what the closed road vets are, if it was, let's say, I know Cardigan Bay Rally is too new to actually put it in yet, and they don't want it at the moment, but eventually, a couple of years' time, they'll be there. So you've got Aberystwyth for that one. You've got Northwest stages, which they ran out of fish and chips at the start. I mean, hell, bells, they've never run out of fish and chips in any place.
It was one heck of an event, though, wasn't it? It really was.
Wasn't it just brilliant? In Circuit of Ireland's back, that's Belfast. That's big. That's lovely.
Yeah.
Where else? Jim Clark could do it Edinburgh if needs be. Again, they've done it before. So all these type of closed road rally lend themselves to more publicity. Yeah. Whereas we're almost hiding rallying when we go to the front. We're almost apologetic for it to be there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, we don't want to upset anybody, so don't tell them we're coming.
Yeah, that's a really, that would be a divisive room of debate. We should do that. that would really go somewhere.
Well, it's been talked about.
It's getting those brands back. You know, like we said about the Heat for Hire. You know, those iconic liveries. It's getting those companies to come back and support rallying, and you know, it might be like with us with the Yuasa car. You know, to make it an iconic brand, so people.
We are the poor relation of rallying in the whole of Europe.
Yeah.
I was talking to Andy Mills today. He's over in the Czech Republic as a steward for an ERT event. Have a look on EWRC again. And there's 2 weekends ago there was Rome. Last weekend there was Alba. This weekend there's Arezzo.
Yeah. They're
full every single round. Yeah. In Arezzo, and I thought, well, they won't get many entries because they've had 2 rallies on the bounce. There's 32 R5 cars entered for the Arezzo rally this weekend.
Yeah.
There's Hungary, there's Slovenia, there's Estonia's on next week, Lithuania, you know, and they've all got 20, 30 R5s.
Yeah.
We haven't.
Yeah.
Because we're not doing it properly.
We need Greenlight Sports and Entertainment in there, getting these USs and.
Yeah, well, no, but it's a good point that Mike says, because you know, motorsport is alive. Because karting, you go to a kart race, it's full.
Yeah.
People are out there spending money and doing it. You know, with the Ginetta, the juniors, it's full. So I think rallying, you're right. It's missing a trick, because actually it's brilliant. You know, it's great to watch. Great people. Like I said, it's maybe just a little bit too much of a well-kept secret, and you got to get.
I'm sure it is. I looked at, apart from Scandinavia, every national championship in Europe is closed roads. Everyone, even the French. French have got a gravel championship, but it's not their number one.
But even if you've got a gravel championship in Europe, there's still a town centre start. Wayne Goldring and I have said for years that the BTRDA needs town centre starts the night before. If you're in, when they did that one at the Scarborough Seafront for the track rod. Yeah. It's fantastic. There are people everywhere. People getting signatures from BTRDA rally drivers, and
I think that's also, Dan. You've got to understand that it is so difficult to organise a rally in the United Kingdom.
Yeah,
and they are small clubs. There's small teams. You almost need another team of people to organise a start and a finish when you want to promote the rally to that degree. And a lot of clubs haven't got that manpower, or are frightened of doing it because they're ordinary chaps, you know. They're motorsport enthusiasts. They're not PR people. Yeah. They're not sort of. A lot of them aren't business people. They're just people that love rallying and want to put it on.
But that's where people like Motorsport UK can help with a little bit of sort of direction. And actually, if you've got some repeatability where events happen yearly, it becomes easier then, because it's a case of just it's happening next year. It's happening next year. So if you can get some consistency. There's a template then, isn't there, that you can follow, and it's just getting that momentum going and kind of having a bit of a structure, which is maybe what's missing at the minute. I don't know, but
I'm not throwing any hats in the ring. Right. I'd love to be a part of seeing that happen at some point.
Getting serious, this.
I can see your beer getting close to the bottom, so I'm going to get onto the questions that we've been asked. Just a few that I picked out. If that's all right. Scott Woodwiss on Facebook. He's a club racing commentator, actually. He says, is there anyone that you and Russell competed with that you think could have been a world championship star but never made it that far? You mentioned Tony earlier.
Dave Metcalf. I had a year with David. He was as quick. I was fortunate. I only went with Colin McRae once, and he was 18, 19 years of age. We did the Swedish. And you knew, as soon as I sat with him, you knew, I was comfortable because I knew what he could handle it. And despite the fact that he'd never been with me on snow, studs, face notes, nothing, I was comfortable. I was confident. Metcalf was as quick as Colin. There's no doubt about that. Now, David didn't have the opportunity to drive a big car. He was always in Astras, Novas, small, the odd Manta, but he was good. He could wring the neck of the smaller car, and I think if he could do that, it's like whatever I say to the youngsters that are coming through the Fiesta R2s, for instance. They're easy, lovely cars to drive, but you've got to squeeze the pip out of an R2 if you're ever going to be able to be successful in an R5 or anything else. It's the commitment you've got to do, and Metcalf had got that in spades.
He's back the Novas into corners. He was already on the power going forwards as he's coming backwards into a hairpin.
Definitely, David was getting. I mean, I haven't seen much of. I must admit, George Letley impressed me.
Yes, massively.
I'd love to see him get a car and really do a proper program and do it a full season and do it properly. He could be very good. He could be very good.
Yeah, no, I would agree on that, actually.
James Williams as well. I think he's a good lad.
Yeah. So
There's a lot
of the future
Irish
there as
fellas.
well. It was a good question. A couple of stars for the future there, as well as someone that didn't make it in the past. That's good.
Yeah.
Anushka Mack on Facebook says, what moment in rallying stands out most for you? And she wants to know what springs to your mind first. None of this, there was loads of them. Just the first thing that came to your mind when you heard that.
God, I think I've already said it, driving across the bridge at Sydney. I think that's got to be it. I mean, that's got to be it, really. That virtually changed. I mean, London, Mexico introduced me to motorsport. I think probably London, Sydney changed my life.
Wow. Because
Mercedes was such a big thing. Little story. I met Sterling Moss about 2 years ago. A mate of mine had got to do, and he was at it. So I went over, and I met him a couple of times, but I never really sat down and had a chat with him. And he had just come back, flown back in with Simon Taylor, the journalist, from Stuttgart, from an award ceremony for Mercedes winning the Formula One thing. It was early December, so it was just after the last Grand Prix at Abu Dhabi. And I sat with him, and I said, he said, I'm always invited by Mercedes to go to anything, and I'd love going there if I can. And I said, do they still give the Mercedes pin for winning a world championship or a special event? He said, oh my gosh, yes. He said, so I actually gave it to Lewis. In our day, they used to get, and I have one of those pins.
Really?
Isn't that fantastic?
Oh, wow, that is cool.
And it's tiny. It's not even the same size, probably the same size as my thumbnail, but it's a little tiny gold pin. And the stars have got two little diamonds on each of the stars.
Oh, wow.
And it says London, Sydney. And it's probably the smallest thing that I've ever got from anybody. And that means the most to me.
Yeah. The list of things I need you to take a picture of after this podcast grows, Mike.
Yeah. Okay, I'll send you a picture of that, yeah.
Phil Taylor says, would you ever, given the chance, co-drive in a new generation WRC car?
Yes. But I think I'd change the pace notes.
Fantastic. You and Dave Richards might disagree on that.
I'm sure. I absolutely think so. I think, yes, I would definitely. Wow. Yes. Why not? I sat with Craig. The last time I've been in a proper, really serious car was with Craig Breen in 2013 in the Super 2000, which, is equivalent to R5. And that was pretty good. But obviously these WRC things are different again, aren't they? I honestly believe actually that they've gone the wrong way with them. I know they're fantastic to see, and I know it's the hair on the back of their head and all that type of crap. It'll land in tears, or manufacturers will pull out.
Yeah.
Full stop. And when you see that the average European event is having upwards of 20 R5s, why don't we have an R5 championship? Thank you very much.
Yeah.
People can afford it. It brings the costs down. You can actually pitch in against the works teams and see where you are. That was the lovely thing about the RAC in the 80s.
Yeah.
Privateer in the same car could go and see what it was like against the big boys in the same car. You can't now.
Absolutely. And the cost will be, much more, costs will come down,
When you're talking about a car, it's £1 million now, aren't you?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's crackers.
But they'll sell you one, which most of them won't.
Like M Sport running 5 or 6 customers, or 5 or 6 cars, and if each of the manufacturers did the same thing, then there's a real opportunity for young talent to be, potentially break into the works team. Maybe not going to get paid, but they can be run by that team. And
I'm very lucky, and one of the things that I'm sort of most proud of at the moment is that I sit on the FIA Rallies Commission. I'm the UK representative. I love it. I really love meeting all the boys from around the world and thinking that we've all got the same regulations and we all treat them in a different way. It's weird. But I remember in 2016 when Red Bull and WRC came together and said, this is what we want. Here's the design. They showed it to us. And I remember with Joe, and there was a guy from Portugal sitting next to me, Pedro, and we went, why? It was all image. The reason we've got those cars is image, is television. It looks good.
Trying to make it look sexy, yeah.
Yes, but you can only get so many people on the side of a road watching the rally. It's for the telly. It's not it does impress people on the side of the road, but you're not going to get 500 million people. You only get on the telly.
On TV as well. We have the same in racing. You can't tell the speed. Whether they're doing. Then there might be 20 seconds a stage faster, but to the viewer, you can't tell that. So
I love watching what you do because there are so many of the cars in a black pan or a GT race. I mean, it's fantastic. There's always something happening.
Yeah.
Isn't there really?
Yeah, there is. Yeah.
You've got 8 cars doing the WRC.
Yeah.
If you've got R5s, we'd have probably in a world championship event, I don't know, how many would you have? 40, 50?
Already in WRC 2, you have a lot more than the WRC 1, don't you? I know at Alton Park when we did that obviously last year on WRC, I stayed in a hotel just nearby and the WRC 2 boys were coming through after we done the stuff with Gronholm and stuff on the stage. And it was just loads of them.
But it's like with what's the Belgian one? Is it Flanders? What's the
Ypres?
Ypres. So we can go with Matt Edwards with our R5, and there'd be Thierry Neuville in a Hyundai R5, and what a great thing for him to be able to take on Thierry Neuville.
Correct.
And actually, if he can go out there and beat him or on some stages, then suddenly it means that he's then got the eyes of the manufacturers on him because he's impressed.
Yeah,
I think you're absolutely right. I think it gives a great opportunity for it's a much level playing field and real quality.
And as far as telly's concerned, you're right. You do a little bit see there a bit quicker, but it's only gone.
Yeah.
But if you could make a program out of 40, the program is the guy at car 45 is actually leading the rally. Hello, that's the story.
Why the BTRDA is so good, isn't it?
You get a Dave Metcalf come and suddenly beat the works boys, and then that's what used to happen.
Yeah.
I remember finding Malcolm Patrick from. He got a works drive out of an Ascona that he bought, and he won some rally. And Fall said, "Who's he?" I said, "He's a dentist in Birmingham. We'll give him a car." Because you could, and you would get that if everybody was in the same car.
Yeah. Remember when Blomqvist was he third on the RAC during the?
Oh, his Skoda.
That was brilliant. In the Felicia kit car.
He laughed himself all the way around. I remember going and sitting in a little caravan in Chester just before the finish.
I was there.
Him and Benny Melando were absolutely in stitches. I mean, they had so much fun.
I bet they did.
That was probably the most enjoyable rally that I think Stig had ever done. Yeah.
Oh, I can imagine, actually. But there was, just to let you know, there were loads of great people who were actually sharing memories with us rather than asking questions. Like Craig Russell was talking about, it was one of his biggest fondness in rallying and motorsport was watching battles between you and Russell and Jimmy McRae. He describes those as epic. Pete Ellis saying that 1985 was the ultimate head-to-head that he's ever seen in rallying. Brookes, Broad coming out on top, getting revenge after 84. You just putting you out there, and the Brookes and there was John Good remembered. He was very fortunate to sit in the room with Tony Pond once, who told a story about you and him trying to keep up with a car that seemed to be out of control in front. Turned out to be Stig Blomqvist, the car in front. Andrew Pandino saying,
"Oh gosh, that was on an Arctic rally." Yeah.
You're looking on the results. But, some great memories come. Andrew Pandino saying he loves Mike Broad. He feels fortunate to have spent a couple of evenings in your company. I'm sure he means at a rally forum rather than anything else, Mike.
Cheers.
So having you on, certainly on social media, got everybody going. And
that's very kind.
So those stories, I've always wanted to bottle those on this since we started doing it. And I said to Guy a few times, I need to get Mike Broad on. So I think we've got a few quick fire questions.
Yeah, we have, Mike. So we've got some questions for you. So it's literally first thing that comes into your mind, or first thing that comes into your mind for the question. So here we go. Top Gear or Grand Tour?
Top Gear.
RAC Rally or Manx?
RAC Rally.
Walter Röhrl or Roger Clark?
Oh, that's not fair. Depends where I meet them. Walter Röhrl.
Beach holiday or adventure holiday?
Beach.
Dogs or cats?
Dogs, definitely.
There you go. Right, okay. So we've got Group A. Is that right? Group
4 or Group B?
Or Group B. Sorry, my
B.
right.
Group B.
Group B. Okay. Right. I've got a pass along question from Mr. Andy Merrick, our previous guest. I'm gonna change this a little bit. So bear with me. If you could sit with any driver in any rally car, what who would it be and what car would it be?
And the person that I always would have loved to have sat with was Hannu Mikkola.
Yeah.
I know him very well. I know that sounds spaghetti, but I love him as he's not well, actually, unfortunately. I've been in touch with him recently. He's not a well boy at the minute. And he was just a lovely, lovely man in a quattro. Got to be. And it would be an event probably that I've never done. That's what I would like. So it would be Hannu in a quattro, and let's say
Beaver Rally,
Safari Rally.
The Beaver Rally.
Safari. That's
Safari.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Have you got a pass along question for our next guest, Mike? Bear in mind you don't know who it'll be yet. It might be Mike Nicholson, Guy.
It could be. It could well be. We don't know yet. But
in fact, should we get? I think we should get Mike to ask a question for Mike Nicholson, because I reckon we could get an interesting one there.
Could do, yeah.
Ask Mike Nicholson, what does he know about motor racing?
There's a smile there somewhere. And
what does he know about motor racing? Yeah.
we'll ask him that. And just a blind question then for if it's not Mike Nicholson next. We'll ask Mike that one. But
right. Okay. Just for somebody else. Right. Okay. Yes. If you weren't a professional, presumably, are you talking to professional people that have been professional motorsport people?
Yeah.
If you weren't a professional motorsport person, what would you have done?
Right. Okay. Great question. Thank you very much. Make a note of that one. Good.
So we need, just to look at that list of things we need photos of, we definitely need that Mercedes pin, Mike, and we also need a photo of those little books that fit in the palm of your hand from Epping, from the Tour of Britain with Jerry Marshall. I'd love to see those little books, because they're little stories like that.
I could go and get them now, but do you want me to just send you a photograph of them?
Yes, please. That would be awesome.
No problem.
But thank you so much for coming on.
I've enjoyed it.
The things you do in rallying are fantastic, and as we heard a little bit, but I can't stress how much Mike's doing for the future of rallying as well. So thank you for the stories.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Guy. I've really enjoyed myself.
It's been really great listening to about your career and all the great stories. And as Paul said, obviously you've still got given a lot back to rallying, and hopefully we'll see more better days for rallying ahead. And look forward to that. But thank you very much. Remember,
if you are listening to this on iTunes or wherever you download your podcasts, we're also on YouTube as well, and we're now on all the social media platforms: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram as well. So we'll see you on there.